Welcome to Insight, a series exploring the deeper philosophies of renowned traditional martial artists, hosted by Ray Hughes, a martial artist with 50 years of experience.
Hey, welcome everybody to the third and final discussion with my sensei, Sensei Marlon Moore. In this final discussion, he continues discussing his views and philosophies of that time period, the Japanese and those early American instructors. He also goes into introducing children for the first time in our programs, and that was probably in the early 80s. And then he finishes up talking about why were we changing dojo locations, it seemed like all the time back in those days. Because there was no money. That's how it was back in those days. Anyway, welcome to the show and welcome Sensei Marlon Moore. Do you think from your viewpoint now that there was a change, obviously, from that period of time to where we are today? Have you seen that change?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I
Is it
think
because
the
they all
biggest
died out?
Yeah, probably. I think a lot of them did, though. A lot of the ones who were in that rank are gone now. There
They
are
are.
no schools. They have no students or
Yeah.
anything, and I think so much of it changed as attitudes change if you're gonna do these things. I think a lot of it changed with kids when we started teaching kids because you had to think about it differently, and I was a big believer. Kids were great, and you could teach kids a lot of things without having them have to hurt each other to do it. Just
Right.
learning simple things like that they would need for school, how to line up, how to do different things, how to follow directions. That I saw that there was a good need for that, and you can't teach one way to one group and then pound on the other group, you know? And parents not wanting to see their kids get thumped around. And it
Yeah.
just changed how I looked at things and tried to be better. It took time, just
Oh, yeah.
what can you do that's best for the student? In fact, that was our attitude, yours and mine always, is what's best for the student. And that served us, I think, so well through all the time we were teaching because it makes you think about, okay, does it serve the student best to knock him down every time he's out there? No, you're just breaking people's spirit too much. And
Well,
that's what it's about.
I thought, like I was talking with Doug, that like Salt Lake's philosophy was to try to get you to quit the class.
It
You know,
was.
isn't that terrible?
It was terrible. And there was a time I saw in the class where a guy came in and he had never taken a class before, and they put him with this woman. She hadn't been there. She'd been there for quite a while. She didn't stay around. I don't know if you ever met her. Her name was Barbara. She was a really tough black woman. And so they put this guy who's never taken a class with this woman who just proceeds to kick the crap out of this guy so bad that he leaves the dojo and leaves his shoes, didn't even take his shoes with him. When he left, he walked out the door. And I remember feeling so bad. How's this guy feeling right now, about this situation? But that was what they wanted to see. If you could take it and you could get beat up and wanted to come back, and sometimes felt it was just new meat. They just wanted to beat somebody up.
Yeah. I was talking to Doug about kids. I don't remember kids for a while. Were there kids right away, or
No, no, we
when did
didn't
they
we
come
didn't
bring them
do
in?
I'm trying to remember that too. I remember we didn't have any kids at first, and then we started doing, I think it was like 7 to 12 or something like that. We had a little group. Primarily, they were siblings of somebody else, so they were already coming. And that's where I started getting more interested because some of these kids had learned so much just by watching their older
Right.
brother or sister doing the class. And then even later go into younger ages because you could modify even younger ages and teach them again about rules and about doing right things, being good people, trying to add the a lot of the things that were supposed to be part of Bushido, but were not really shown very often. But no kids at all until I think we were in the it must have been the 80s before we even started the 7 to 12-year-olds. And that was only by kind of by exception if somebody was a brother or sister and really wanted to do it, and then just realized there was so much you could teach those kids that it was actually a great age to teach kids to do that.
Yeah, I'm glad that kids are part of the program because you can give them so much. It's harder to teach philosophy to an adult, but you can to a child. So you come to Arizona from the mid '70s to the mid '80s, because that's when I started. My school was in the mid '80s, and it just seemed like we were changing dojo locations about every 6 months during the '70s,
Yeah.
'80s. Why was that? What was going on there?
There was just always issues of something. It was either an issue if we were renting space for like a dance studio, I remember, and then
Yeah, yeah.
one of the students broke a piece of the wood in the on the dance floor, and they kicked us out for that. They didn't like that, and it was partially too is didn't charge much money. I mean, I
Right.
never changed from $25 a month, that was it, and if I couldn't pay that, I'd work it. So it was just trying to get a place that would work that, didn't cost us a whole lot of money, and so, yeah, we moved a lot. The first dojo we had, there's so many funny stories about that because no one had even been in that building for 40 years, and we put it
Yeah.
all together. Nothing was to code. We had to replumb it with electricity, and the only thing that saved us, we would get the fire department come and leave notices all the time they wanted to do inspections because it was a three-story building and the dojo was in the top, and there was a fire escape, but it was cut off. And so I'd get these notices that they wanted to come and meet me, and they never came at night, and so I never answered them, and so I never had to deal with it. But if they would have really inspected it, like I said, the fire escape went down, then there was a big drop, it had been cut off, and
So
we
now I understand why you started teaching all students this tuck and roll. In case there was a fire, you knew how to jump off the second story.
exactly, exactly. You
Oh, I
had to
get it
get
now.
out quickly.
During those times, you were like most people. You had a real job, right, during the day,
Mhm.
and then this because you never made money in martial arts. You were always going into your pocket.
Yep.
Is that because you didn't have a business background and money? Well, yeah, I don't know about you, but I just remember being groomed, and I don't think it came from you, but I think it came from the culture of martial arts. Is you were not supposed to make money. Making money was
Right.
evil. I never thought about the Japanese here that were all rich and famous.
Yep.
Was that the philosophy in your heart?
Yeah, it was, put into you so much that if you were making money, you were being too easy. You're giving out ranks or
Commercialized.
commercialized, exactly. And I think, that was a hard one to get over. It was
Yes,
a very hard
yes.
one to get over, and I think you proved that more than anybody because your school grew and you had great students, and so there was no one could ever complain about the quality, that was going on, but it was you just didn't make money.
That still is in my soul. So when I started my school, it became obviously real quick that you got to collect money to pay the bills. And I was full
Mhm.
time and full time instructor at that time. But I had that problem. So what I had to do is I had my secretary take over. It was a mom that would, I'd trade out her dues for her kid. I said, "Can you collect the monies and stuff because I can't do it. I won't do it, and I'll go out of business." Even to this day, I struggle with that charging your value. It took so
Mhm.
long to get to that point. So now you're in the '80s. I started school. We're running schools side by side for a long time. Was that a good period in your time, or was it a bad period, or what's your thoughts of that era in your
I
life?
think it was a good era. I think
I
the
thought
thing
so
is
too.
we always had a good synergy with
Yeah.
each other. We didn't do things exactly the same.
No.
We were more peers than anything else, and so we could discuss anything, and if I said, "I really wanna do it this way," and you really wanna do it, okay, that's fine, that's your school. I tried, to never interfere, never get involved
Right.
money-wise with that kinda
You're
stuff.
right.
And the fact that we could deal that way, we always seemed to come up with things that fit our personalities and yet were positive. And I learned a lot from what you were doing, whether I agreed with it or not at
Right.
first. And I think it went both ways. And so together we had this like a competition in a
Yep.
way,
Oh,
kidding
yeah.
around, but it's,
Very
we always
fun.
wanted to be better than
Yeah.
Scottsdale, and
Yeah.
Scottsdale always wanted to be better than Chandler. But it was always the student came first, and it helped
Yeah.
because when we had a situation, because there's always situations coming up with a student's behavior or a bad parent's behavior, what do we do? That together we could come up with some solutions that were better than we would have got on our own, and it just worked well. And we spent so much time talking about it, like you said, going to tournaments, and it never stopped. There wasn't a point where we said, okay, we know it all now. We're going to tournaments for years, and hanging out and talking what's new, who's doing what, who's suc successful, who's got good students, who's got loyal students, which guys are the jerks that carried on in those areas the same
Yeah.
way.
What was really nice was to be able to be with a partner, friend, a sensei. We had the same philosophies more or less, and it was so cool to observe other organizations and schools and observe the good things that they did and the bad things. And I remember talking a lot about one of the biggest problems that other schools and organizations had was a money thing. You know, this dojo had to send money to the chief instructor for belt exams or this or that, and this started chaos, and then they would either go out of business or break up. That was a common theme all the way across, and yet we didn't have that problem because of that, I think.
I agree. I think that was a big part of it because it isn't, it doesn't have to be that way,
Right.
especially in most of the cases that I remember where the head instructor didn't do anything. In
Yeah.
fact, he was probably pretty demeaning to the people,
Right.
didn't treat, they were the stepchildren of the real dojo kind of thing. They
Right.
learned from
Right.
somebody else. And it created that attitude of the Japanese was here and everybody else was going to be somewhere underneath them.
To wrap up the show a little bit for today, I want to talk about retirement. We were both retired now from
Mhm.
martial arts. I wanted to ask you how that process has worked for you. I just remember when Ray Dalkey retired and got out of
Mhm.
martial arts, and I just remember at that time myself thinking, how could he dare do such a thing? How can a master leave the school and stuff? Did you feel that way?
Yeah, I
And
did.
then, but then we both retired. Now, in my opinion, I think it's different today than then. Back in the day, I guess the sensei died in the school. Today's culture of people, I don't think they see it that way, so there's not a need for us to die in the school. What's your thoughts on that?
I agree. I think mine changed a lot from retiring, and in my case retiring partially because of health situations that
Yeah,
I couldn't control. So that made it one thing, but then as time went by with that, I think I noticed you have to have people who can do it, not just
yes,
explain it. You need to have that different levels of groups where you can have, yeah, somebody can say something, but you have to have someone who can demonstrate that really well. And there's a point that you can't demonstrate it the same way. In fact, that was one of the things that I thought was a little negative from Utah and with Sensei Osaka was, he would tell different people, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't fight with your students. And
yeah,
it was like, even though you can beat your students, you don't want ever to look like they could beat you. And one of the
yeah,
things that Rick Holbush did, and he always did, and I give him so much credit because he always fought every class. He fought every student at the end of class, one by one. He'd fight every student. And I thought, yeah, as his skills maybe went down, he still could beat anybody very easily, you know.
Right.
But it took the ego away. And he wasn't afraid to say that was a good shot, you know, or something like that, or
Right.
that worked. And I think it just came down to ego. If you can't dominate completely, then it's better to not do it, you know. And Sensei Osaka didn't spar. I sparred with Sensei Osaka once, just he and I,
I
and that
never
was
saw him spar in my tenure. I've
we,
never
we
seen
just
him.
played, and that's the only time I'd seen him spar. And that was just
Yeah.
he and I were there, and he was doing something. He wanted to try some things, and he played around with me for a few minutes, and I mean, he absolutely could have destroyed me. He didn't hurt me or anything, but he was doing some interesting moves and some things that he had actually seen. It was a taekwondo thing. He had seen a guy do a spinning wheel kick or something. He wanted to try it, and he was working on the bag, and I came in early and said that looked cool, and so then we played around with it a little bit, you know, and his skill was fantastic, but
Yeah.
the fact I could never understand why he didn't do more of that. He would use Joe or Rick, Crazy Joe as we called him, or
Oh, yeah.
Rick, and that was Rick would go as hard as you wanted to go, so that was his philosophy. You wanna go hard, he can go hard. You wanna go softer, he'll go softer. Joe only had one way, and that was hard, and he made it quick. He made it quick, and he had an attitude of wanting to hurt people, and that
Yeah.
was ingrained into him, and I think that drew other people that were like that, because 'cause I've never really seen a dojo anywhere that there were that extreme about hurting each other, you
Yeah.
know, and it being okay. It's being okay. Like, okay, next day we forget about it. My nose is over here, but block better next time, that kind of mentality.
Well, like I was talking to Doug, I never thought about anything that this is what karate is. It's punching and
Mhm.
kicking each other. So why would you whine? And if you didn't block and you get your nose broke, well, that's on you, you know. Uh,
Mhm.
in retrospect, I'm glad to have experienced that. I think it made me a tougher fighter, somebody that could fight harshly if he had to. And you can only learn that being in harsh training.
Mhm.
Of course, I don't believe that should be done this today, but what as we wrap up the show, what's your final thought on karate today? Is it as strong as it used to be? Is it better? I'm talking more on the competition side. Because now, like I was talking to Doug, a lot of the old guys are against competition, and yet they were sparring with us back in the day. Where do
Mhm.
you stand on that?
I think sparring is very important. I always felt sparring was important. I think it's the closest thing you'll get to the real thing, and it's getting over the fear, of
Yeah,
what can happen. I worked with a guy once, and we were talking about karate, and he told me, and he said, one of my biggest fears in life is if someone attacked my wife or attacked me, and I got hit, what I would do, because I've never been hit
yeah,
ever by anybody in anger. I grew up and there was just never any kind of fighting, and I thought, that's not good. You need to feel a little bit about that. I had 2 older brothers, so I got pounded enough from that, not to really hurt you, but to realize that, yeah, you can get through those things. There's a difference too, I think, of 2 people that wanna fight hard and 2 people, or one wants to hurt you and the
right,
other one doesn't, and that's where the cheap shots came in and the things that used to bother me a lot, okay, go out and spar, everybody go easy, and boom, somebody gets their nose broken the first move out, and we've seen some of that kind of stuff, and that's more of an attitude. The rule changes are hard for me, but I don't know enough about the rules,
right,
but the
right.
levels also, what I've seen is the level has gone up so much more.
The technical level.
The
Are you
technical
talking?
level. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And I think that's good. I think that's what it should be, and I think everybody should compete somewhat. If you're not a
Yeah.
great competitor, that's fine, but at least get out there and do some sparring and get the feel, because you never get the timing or the distance or things like that without actually doing it with somebody. Even one-step sparring or three-step, that's not the same. And
No.
that's why I like to and used to encourage doing things with other groups, like we used to go to that Wing Chun school, and then we went to a Kempo school. We go to different places and free spar with those guys because they were different. And you had to
Yes.
see what's the difference here? What's gonna work? And the Wing Chun school was funny because I don't know if you remember it. We
I
went
do
out and
remember.
boom, hit somebody and they'd fall down, and next to and hit somebody and they'd fall down. And the guy said, "We don't punch like that to the body, or we don't do that to the body." That's all we did, was punch hard to the body. So, but he learned from that too. I think he came around and he learned
Right.
about, you got to be able to do that. And we learned more that sometimes what looks like little flittily things with your fingers, that if they did them properly, could really hurt you or take your eye or do some things like that. Just understanding there was some good things in dealing with different people that are going to move in different ways.
I remember that because I remember getting back to the dojo and one not being impressed with their physical skill to handle kicks and punches, but we were getting hit in the face with these little flicky things.
Yep.
And I remember coming back to the dojo. Well, thank you, Sensei. Before I wrap up, one thing I want to do, and I mentioned this to Doug, is I would love to have you and Doug and Hobush and see if we can do some sort of a group podcast to talk about the old days, because you guys have great memories. I can't remember anything.
And I
And then
remember less than you, so
that's the problem about getting older. Because like Doug said, memories bring out other lost memories or forgotten
right,
memories. And I would love to
right,
have a discussion mostly revolving around that period where the Japanese come into the United States and that time period, because I think it's just such a fascinating time for the start of American Japanese karate, because
right.
that's an
I
interesting period. And
Yeah,
so
I'd
you'd be
love to
willing to
do
do
that.
that?
You bet.
Good.
I think that would be great. I'd love to hear what everybody has to say because I think we all have our own slants and how
Yes,
things
yes.
came to us, but it was a very unique time, and it's totally changed now because, so many of those guys are gone.
They are. They are gone, and things have changed. Well, thank you, Sensei. I hope you
Thank
have a
you.
great day, and this was a pleasure. Maybe we'll also get together for another podcast to talk about maybe the later years of our lives and what we learned and what we forgot and stuff like that. So have a great
Sounds
day.
good. Thank you. You too.
All right, take care. Hey, well, thank you for joining my discussions with Sensei Marlon Moore. My next guest is Sensei Rick Hobush, maybe not as well known across the United States, but definitely a rock star. He started his training in the late 60s, so I think you'll find his perspectives and his thoughts on philosophies of that early period of the late 60s into the 80s. So with that, we'll see you at the next show.